Okay, everyone, I will start. It is David Morgan, and we are on April 15th, 2020. This will be a quick overview of where we are in the silver market. This is titled, Why Silver, Why Now? And I don't know why this been a bit of a technical difficulties this morning. I apologize. I've used this software many, many times, but so why silver, why now? And one of the most important things I can let everyone know right at this point is where are we relative to the value of silver and the fiat money system. So this is from John Williams,
Hey, can you hear him?
metals.com, with the real inflation numbers using the calculator. So the bottom of the silver market that everyone can refer to is
Okay.
during the Great Depression.
I couldn't hear him.
And at that time, silver
That's
fell
okay,
to an
it's not now.
all-time low at
Sorry.
that time of
Okay.
22 cents an ounce.
Okay.
So I picked 1929. If you chose 1930, 31, it's changed the number slightly. But 22 cents in the Great Depression is equal to about $22 now. And right now we are in the retail market around that price. I just looked at Silver Eagles on Kitco and also the Australian Mint, and they were both selling approximately 22.50 per ounce per coin. My point is simple. The spot price of silver is somewhere around 16 or less at this point in time, which means in the value terms, fiat terms, that you're actually buying silver lower priced per ounce than you were in 1930. I know $22 doesn't equal 22 cents. My point is that the value of $22 today is equal to the value of 22 cents in 1930. Hopefully that's crystal clear, because there are penniless billionaires. One of my favorite books on my bookshelf behind me is The Penniless Billionaires. I also have a slide I put up on my Twitter feed from time to time that says starving billionaires from Zimbabwe. And this black gentleman's holding up a sign that shows all of these Zimbabwe notes on this poster, and he's unable to feed his family. So it's not how many zeros are in your bank account. At sometimes during, it can be. Certainly, most of my life it's been that way. But I'm just pointing out that inflation's insidious, and that we are at a point where we're buying silver very, very cheap. This is from my friend Nick Laird. This is the gold silver ratio. It goes from 1720 to present day. And you could extrapolate this out to 00. I mean, you could go from BC, 2000 BC. You go into ancient Egypt. You can go 5,500 years in the past till present, and you will find that the silver gold ratio, or the gold silver ratio, excuse me, never got above 20 that whole time until basically 1873. And at that time, we were demonetizing silver. So when silver and gold serve the same function as money, the ratio actually stayed pretty close to what the natural ratio is, which at that time was around 12 to 1, is currently roughly 10 to 1. So after demonetization, as you can see on this chart, and I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, we hit 100 basically in the war period in the 1940s, and then we did it again briefly or close to it after roughly 1990, exactly somewhere in the 1990s, excuse me. And it's only been in very, very recently where we actually went up to, I think it was 123 or so, very briefly, which is on this chart from Mike Maloney, goldsilver.com. And this is not a real-time chart, but he has it on his website. And the ratio got to, again, I think it was 123. Right now we're about 110. So as far as I'm concerned, it's already peaked, and silver is starting to outperform gold slightly. But I think what's interesting, if you look at from the start of the bull market in silver, what's really started, in my the way I view the market, when it broke above the 555 level basis spot September 2003, which is roughly here. If you can see my cursor, you can all look here and get a brief idea. The exact dates and whatever aren't all that important. You can just think of 2003. Some people, now gold started back in 2000. I won't argue that. Silver lagged gold at that time to get into its bull market by a couple of years, actually. And that's the way I analyze the market. You can accept that or not. So we got up to, and at that time, the ratio was around 80 to 1. And then we got into this area here where it was below that, back up, touched around 80 to 1 or so, back down. And through most of the bull market so far, we stayed around 80 to 1 as the maximum there, and there until we got above it here in 2019, which indicates a lot of things, and I don't have time to go into it. I'll be doing another lecture for my members probably today or tomorrow. So this is a very brief update that I've given throughout basically the speaking circuit over the last few years, and why I think that the final leg in silver will set a record. And one of them has to do with the inverse relationship of gold to stocks. Gold, not silver, but gold is the most negatively correlated asset to the stock market. And I'm talking gold, not gold stocks. Although I think gold stocks will absolutely outperform gold over the next few years, at the present time, I'm basically being very cautious because the gold stocks are acting highly correlated to stocks in general, which is what I would expect at this point in the cycle, in this last, what I'll call phase of economic reality, an economic wake up or reset, as many refer to it. Silver and gold are correlated 85% of the time, not 100% of the time, but 85% is a high correlation, which implies that if gold does very well during this economic reset, that silver will also. Doesn't necessarily mean one for one, doesn't necessarily mean day by day. As I just pointed out, the silver market actually started its major bull move after gold had already established it probably 2 years prior, from my analysis. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way, folks. Here we go. So silver in today's dollars. Again, this is from the source I cite, shadowstats.com, looking at, what we talked about, 22 cents and $22. Silver would be somewhere, believe it or not, in this cliff high number here, 590, rounded up to 600. That sounds absolutely absurd. It sounds like unrealistic. It sounds blah, 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 blah. You can criticize me all you want. All I am showing you is the data. I'm not trying to say I know the exact price in paper that silver will achieve. What I'm trying to explain explicitly is that silver is very undervalued at today's price. I'm trying to make that point in numerous ways. Now, if we look at the silver market in the last time frame, when I was a youngster, back when I was a little more vibrant than I am today, but I'm still upright and breathing, excuse the funny joke. We look at silver back here in 72. The basic monetary price of silver is $1.29 an ounce. A silver dollar is roughly 3/4 of an ounce. And if you do the arithmetic, you'll figure that out by why an ounce of silver would be $1.29 in fiat terms, rather than a dollar equal a dollar, because a piece of paper that says dollar Federal Reserve note is not equal to a constitutional dollar, which is 371.25 grains of 999 fine silver, which again is roughly 3/4 an ounce. So if you start back, the monetary value roughly is a couple pennies higher, and go all the way through the 1980 bull market, you will note how rapidly it rose. It took a long time, basically, in a bull market through the 70s, but not much of one, pretty flat line. And then 79, this 1 year from where my cursor is to the top, 1 year, look at what happened in the silver market. Why? Well, there's lots of reasons. The main one I have determined is that there was a breakdown in faith in the United States dollar, and there was a rush to something that was substantive, which at that time, silver actually made up more sense than gold to a lot of people because silver was actually in the monetary system up through 1964, and actually in silver dollars a few years past that with the Kennedy halves. So a lot of people of my age group looked at, and older, looked at silver as the last resort monetary asset. That's not necessarily true now that I've reached old age and that most people don't equate silver with anything other than an industrial metal. So now let's compare the above 1970 bull market to roughly where we are today. And you can see this flat line, if you will, slight uptrend, slight bias to the upside, is kind of similar to where we are here. Remember, markets, history rhymes, it doesn't repeat exactly. So I just want to point that out for you analytical types out there. So here's what I'm going to do very briefly again in layman's terms that has been said by many. What if 90% of the move comes in the last 10% of the time? I just showed you graphically. The total bull market was roughly from the monetary value of silver in 1965 to the peaky peak of $50 an ounce intraday in January of 1980. And that was a heck of a move the last year. So the total move was about $48. 42 of those quote unquote dollars, I'm using the word dollars as fiat dollars, came in the last 13 months of a 180-month bull move. So if you do the simple arithmetic, you'll see that 87.5% of the move came in 7% of the time. So if I take poetic license with it and tell you that 90% of the move comes in the last 10% of the time, we can see that that's nearly a fact, round numbers wise, from what happened in the past. Does the past guarantee the future? Absolutely 100% no. However, we can get a feel for how markets move. And this is not just the silver market. It's how the stock market moves. It's how the real estate markets move. It's how basically any asset class moves. There's a big feeding frenzy at the end of any cycle where everybody that's late to the party thinks that they can't lose and they got to pile in, and you get this big oomph at the end where everybody and his brother-in-law's mother is moving into that market. So in 1979, if you didn't know anything about anything, but you were a speculator or very savvy, doesn't matter. You can take any metaphor that you want. I'm going to say you didn't know much about silver. It was already at $6. And you invested that last year and forgot the previous years from 1965 through 1979 inclusive. And now we're, 78 inclusive. And now it's January of 1979. You decide to buy silver at that all-time high of $6. You would have an 800% gain in a year. So there's a pitch for me. I give a lot of my time, which is the most valuable asset any of us have, for free, and I've been doing it for years. And I do make a living by providing a more in-depth analysis and mostly information through the equity markets in the paid reports. There's a premium service, a mastermind service, and then if you want direct access, there's very few that do that, and I have a waiting list, so you can't get direct access to me, which is through the WhatsApp app, which is a private app that most of you probably are aware of, that you can communicate with me directly. Again, I don't have time to add anybody to that. I'm just pointing out that that feature exists. That's a quick look at page one. Usually these things are, and it's a quality, not quantity product. And honestly, they're usually a bit on the long side. Usually they're in the 15, 16 pages, but they are what they are. Our success is your success. From January 2019 to January 2020, 7 out of 7 were winners. If you had equal money into all of them, you were up 63% for the year. And that's better than I think any of the managed gold funds out there. And most of these guys are friends of mine, and I know them on a personal basis. But if you're a good stock picker, this is what you can do. Now, this is my top tier, cash rich, unhedged mining companies. A few are royalty companies. This is where I tell people when they are subscribers and members to the paid portion of the report, how to allocate their funds so that they make money safely with the least amount of risk. If I analyzed where my mid-tier and my speculations were, they wouldn't have had this good a performance. But what I teach is that most of your money goes here. And companies that we're going to be talking about here in a moment with Dr. Megaw, my friend Peter, are situations that certainly can bring, 5 times, 10 times, 20 times at times, but not always. So in those cases, I mitigate the risk by bet a little to win a lot. And if the company performs as, let's say, we expect it to, I'm not against adding more or a larger position if and only if it performs to what we say the expectations that we all hold. So that's I'm one of the few that actually does it that way. I'm not a big believer of bet the farm in the penny stock world. I'm putting this out, ignore the prices, they're going up. I'm probably going to sell it around 40. I made very little money at 30. And believe me, I don't make money on the book, but I finally got my shipment from China. It arrived yesterday, so there will be the availability to buy the book. For you that are silver nuts, I mean, basically, this is more of an academic read at a level of, high school or beyond for the silver aficionado. It's really not for the general. Anyone can buy it. I'm not saying that. It's just that it's not a beginner primer book on the silver market. That is for sure. Another one written by David Smith and myself is basically how to prevent yourself from not taking a profit in the next leg up. So those are the last 2 books written. I do have a YouTube presence and a Twitter presence. And that is it for now. I do want to take a little bit more time. It looks like I have only gone 20 minutes, which for me is brief. So here's the Twitter page. My Twitter handle is @SilverGuru22. And I just have a few things I want to point out on the main website here. So the one place that all of you I'm suggesting go to fairly frequently is the main website. Obviously, if you're not signed up for the free newsletter, please do over here. And if you don't wish to do that, you can hit the blog function here, and you'll see all the videos that I do, audios as well. Over here on the right, there is a link to a program that allows you to buy silver and gold at the lowest premium that I know of today. Many of my members are aware of it. I'm putting that for the general public. So you can buy silver and gold close to spot even now. So that's one place you should become familiar with is this blog. So there is the Twitter presence up there on the right. I just clicked as I showed you a moment ago. So you can get there from this blog page. Here's the YouTube presence, which I again suggest you can get from the blog page. So again, I'm just at the free section. There's the YouTube presence. There's the Twitter presence. Here's the LinkedIn presence up there at the top. If you are on LinkedIn, so be it. I don't post much here, but I do post from time to time on that. And there is a Facebook presence. It's corporate only. I don't do any of this. I do post my own Twitter feeds, and occasionally I post the LinkedIn feed. This one is all handled by my girls in the Philippines that basically take stuff off the blog and put it up on the Twitter presence. I don't need your friendship. I like having friends. I truly do, but I don't have time to monitor all this stuff. I pay people to kind of give feedback. Once in a while, I will enter into some response on Twitter, but don't expect one. I have a paid membership site, and these paid members are allowed to email me and I guarantee a response to them, but basically they're paying for that. And I'm not trying to be a snob. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just telling you, like everybody else, I've got limited time, and that is a fact. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about it. This other program here, Beat the Bankers, this has to do with options. This is only for sophisticated investors that are tired of seeing the ups and downs of the gold and silver markets. It's basically what the bankers do themselves using a delta spread, which involves options. It's a service that I have recommended, and I use the same techniques. And it's basically a educational system. It's not cheap and it's not for everybody, as pointed out. People have asked me to do more than I'm already doing. The answer is I can't. I just don't have enough time, even though I do have a staff. So these people are somebody I've vetted for a long time. And everyone that has come through this link here has been very satisfied, with the exception of one gentleman that called me from the UK. And basically, there's two sides to every story. His was he didn't like it, and the proprietor of this website that I'm very close to and go to London from time to time to fill my commitment with them, said he was not following the guidelines. In other words, they're going to show you how and when, and you don't how and when they tell you, then basically you're not using the service as provided. So enough said about that. I am going to just silence myself. Do I have to do it, Grace? You're gonna have to type, but if you have control, please take it and put Peter on, because I can't hear any feedback on what I'm saying. And I presume that things went smoothly because I haven't got any messages to the contrary. So I am done. Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Well, good morning. I guess it's over to me. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and is my screen visible?
Yes.
So the corporate presentation is up.
Correct.
Okay, well, I'm Dr. Peter Megaw, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Reyna Silver and silver in Mexico. Going to start off by letting you know that I will be making forward-looking statements. I've been doing that for a long time, but as I'm sure David would tell you, always do your due diligence on anything in this particular market. So Reina Silver is focused on silver projects in Mexico. And so tell you a little bit about why you would do that. Well, first of all, Mexico has produced 25% of all the silver in human history. And that's a lot of silver. That's 12 billion ounces out of Mexico. More importantly, worldwide, there are 15 deposits for districts that have produced over 1 billion ounces of silver, and 8 of them are in Mexico. So that's telling you that Mexico is the place to be, not just for silver, but for big silver. And that is the fundamental basis of why I have spent most of my 40-year career in exploration in Mexico. Mexico produces silver from 2 types of deposits: epithermal veins and carbonate replacement deposits. And I've spent a lot of time working on both of them, but especially on carbonate replacement deposits, which we just call CRDs. And why would you look for these? Well, until about 2.5 years ago, not many people really understood why. And then South 32 bought out Arizona Mining for $1.5 billion. Which sort of changed people's perspective. But for those of us who've worked with them for a long time, the reason you look for them is that they're big. They can be as much as 150 million tons. The grades are high. The grades are variable depending on where you are in the system, but it can be 5 to 50 ounces silver, 3 to 25% zinc, 3 to 25% lead, 0.2 to 5% copper. And in certain zones, you can have significant credits of gold, cadmium, germanium, indium, and occasionally PGEs. It's important to understand that although the ratio of the amount of these metals changes in the deposit, pretty much all of these metals are always present. They tend to be mined underground, but with low mining costs because the ground tends to stand very well. They're metallurgically docile, so you can get the values out. And increasingly important in today's world, they have a minimal environmental footprint. So looking at the map of the carbonate replacement deposit belt of Mexico, the hot pink squares are major deposits. The light pink are smaller deposits. And Santa Eulalia is the buckle on the CRD belt in Mexico. And the Santa Eulalia district is where Reina Silver is working. Santa Eulalia is the biggest carbonate replacement deposit ever found in Mexico. It produced about 50 million tons of ores grading about 10 ounces silver, 8 and 7% lead, so about 15% combined lead and zinc. That's over 500 million ounces of silver. So that makes it the most important CRD in Mexico. But from an exploration standpoint, when we understand how these systems work, we recognize that half of the Santa Eulalia district is missing. So if half of the district will produce like this, you got to wonder what the other half is missing. So what am I talking about when I'm saying half is missing? This model, which is in part based on Santa Eulalia, but also has been checked out and confirmed on exploration for these deposits worldwide. These deposits are related to an intrusive body, magma body, and placed in the Earth's crust in a thick section of carbonate rocks, which is shown in blue here. And you wind up with high temperature alteration, which we call skarn and mineralization around the intrusive stock. And then you have these tendrils or these bodies of essentially pure sulfides, which are tabular. Think of them like linguini or tubes of just pure galena, sphalerite, silver-bearing minerals that extend outward, in some cases for as much as 6 to 8 kilometers from that intrusive source, as what we call mantos, which are sort of flat-lying bodies, or chimneys, which, as you might expect, are sort of vertically oriented tubes of massive sulfides. The portion of Santa Eulalia that has been historically discovered and mined is essentially outboard of the skarn envelope. So it's the mantos and chimneys that my cursor is running on at the moment, and it's this portion, including the intrusive stock which drove everything, which hasn't been found, and that's what we're trying to find. Sorry that this one's a little bit blurry, but if you look at what's called the west camp of Santa Eulalia has mineralization on both sides of the mountain. You have these very nice horizontal mantos, you have these vertical chimneys. It's all related to this pink rock that you see at the bottom, which is a felsic intrusion, and mineralization is quite clearly associated with that. Somewhere down to the south is where that came from. Interestingly, when you get down into this proximal zone in the deepest part of the existing mines, which are now inactive and flooded, the mineralization began to carry 1 to 3 grams gold. This may be an indication that gold is increasing towards the source. So this is a plan view showing what I call the West Camp over here, SEWC for West Camp, SEEC, the East Camp. This is the San Antonio mine over here. The mine we just saw, the Potosi and Buena Tierra mines. Indications are that the source of the West Camp is to the south in this direction. Indications are to the south from East Camp. And this is based on the geometry of the intrusion. It's based on the geometry of the ore bodies. It's based on everything down to things like sulfur isotopes, which is getting very academic and esoteric, but it's telling us that it's down here in this area. And down here in this area, the surface is largely covered by pre-mineral volcanic rocks, which is partially why there's been very little exploration done down here. Until the 1980s, it was believed that those volcanic rocks were post-mineral. Part of the work that I did in my dissertation confirmed that they were pre-mineral, and that the alteration you see them is an indication of what could potentially be underneath. So Reina Silver has all of this ground shown in colors. The large Gigi claim and these smaller claims, these are all under Reina's control. So there has been some exploration. This is not the first time this project has been worked. It is actually one of the 3 projects we started Mag Silver on. And in many ways, Gigi is a victim of MAG's success in the sense that we were so successful on our Juanicipio and Cinco de Mayo projects that Gigi, it was felt, didn't warrant further expenditures compared to those others. So the deal was made with Jorge, with Reyna Silver, for Jorge to take on this project and Bado Pilas, which was MAG's other project in Chihuahua. And so Reyna has acquired this property with about $4.5 million worth of MAG investment in the property, plus a little bit of work that was done before. Tech Resources put in one RC hole out here back in the 1990s just to determine how thick the volcanics were. Our main target area is in here. You can see that there's very little drilling that applies to that. Most of MAG's drilling was over here in the east camp along the structures that control the San Antonio mine, which is the principal mine over there. And we actually hit mineralization in a number of these holes, several hundred meters above the level where the mineralization blossoms in the San Antonio mine. So yes, there's some drilling out here, but essentially the target area that we're most interested in remains untested. So this is where we want to focus our exploration, and this is essentially right on the directional vector coming out of the west camp, suggesting that our source is in this area out here. So a number of the things that we acquire from MAG in the process of taking on this project is a very sophisticated airborne MAG and ZTEM, or transient electromagnetic airborne survey that was done in the late 2000s, actually as we were drilling, and right at the time that the Mexican government put a huge regional claim in on the area to the east for coal bed methane of all things. And it took a number of years before that came off. But essentially what happened was during that time, we were so successful on our other projects that the mandate to come back and work here never really materialized. We also have acquired a lot of satellite imagery. This is older Landsat imagery. We've done some more recent hyperspectral. Essentially, our target area is in this area in here. In the natural color, you can see the alteration in volcanic rocks very nicely. When you manipulate the colors by ratioing the bands, you can see the alteration being brought out, especially here in this one, where you can see how strong the alteration is down in the volcanic in this whole area down here where we think the source is. So we have a lot to put together. Now, when we look at the detailed air magnetic and ZTEM survey, we can see a lot of features in this that are extremely intriguing. These beautiful linear features. This north-northwest trend is one of the major ore trends in the district. This northeast trend is also a major control on mineralization throughout the district. And you can see that these trends are repeating themselves in a number of different places in a number of different ways. No drilling has ever been done based on these results. So what we're doing right now is we have people in the field. Fortunately, although this is only 25 kilometers from a city of 1.5 million people, Chihuahua City, there's nobody who lives out here, so our geologists can get out and work on the surface. You can see the surface is pretty easy to get around on. We're taking the various geophysical and satellite imagery anomalies. We're going out, we're field remapping them, resampling them, putting everything together. Our goal here is to compile all of the existing information, perhaps do some additional geophysics in areas, permit it, and drill it. And assuming that the COVID-19 lid comes off in Mexico fairly soon and the permitting department of the government goes back to work in a geologically reasonable period of time, we expect to have a drill rig turning on this property late this year. In addition to the Gigi property, we have the Bado Pilas Native Silver District, which is out in the Sierra Madre. And this is historically Mexico's highest grade silver producer. from 1878 until 1913, the average grade of the mineralization produced here was 2% silver. The ore bodies basically consisted of crystallized native silver in calcite. We control 95% of the historic district, 300 million ounces of historic production. And again, MAG did a lot of work, recharacterized the district. We got some encouraging drill results, including, our best intercept was 20 centimeters of 19 kilograms silver, so 600 plus ounces of silver per ton. You saw this picture earlier. This is actually 1 month's production of native silver from the Batopilas district, 300,000 ounces when they were in bonanza. So our thesis is that native silver should be visible to modern electrical geophysical techniques. And you saw the topography, it's a little bit radical, but we believe that we have a key on the district and we have a better understanding based on all the work and the drilling done by MAG, again, about $6 million worth of work to date. We understand the intrusive relationships and we understand where the silver veins are with respect to the intrusions. And so we remain having a very large target area, including targets that MAG intended to drill that never got drilled, in part because of a massive rainstorm that washed out one of the access roads to the district. So that's the technical side of things. You've heard me talk. I'm also joined as technical advisor by Doug Kerwin, who's the former VP of exploration from Ivanhoe. He led the discovery of Oyu Tolgoi, which is a major deposit. The team of Mexican geologists working with us down there have a track record of working directly with me on major discoveries made for MAG Silver, Exelon Resources, Pan American Silver, for example. Our capital markets expertise is remarkable. With the creation of Reyna Silver through an RTO process, we get Peter Jones, the former CEO of Hudbay, who will be on our board of directors. Our management has collectively raised over $1 billion for various mining companies. Our institutional shareholders are very strong in Europe, Asia, and North America. That includes Commodity Discovery Fund, Plethora Capital, BIA Gold Master Fund, etc. 19.9% of the company will be owned by MAG at the time of going public. They have the option to retain that or be diluted down if they so choose. 21.5% ownership by management and board. Our primary projects, as you've heard, are Gigi and Batopilas. These are both very strong historic producing districts. Santa Eulalia with 500 million ounces of silver, Batopilas with 300 million ounces of silver, and lots of reasons to believe that there's a lot more exploration upside to daylight in both of these districts. Capital structure of the company, as it stands I believe this is the end of when the company is up and trading, which we expect to happen in the next week or so. About 73 million shares outstanding. We raised 6.59 million Canadian over the last 7 or 8 months, which is remarkable given the state of the market for that sort of thing over the last 6 to 8 months. Gives us a market cap of about 14.5 million Canadian. There's about 18 million warrants out there at 45 cents. And there's a breakdown on the right-hand side of the major shareholders and their percentages. You heard me talk about board and management. Sprott Asset is in there, Commodity Discovery Fund, Century Global, Terra, Plethora, beneath the surface, and BIA Gold. We have a symbol, RSLV.TSX, reserved for use once the RTO is approved by the exchange. CMET will be replaced by that. The CMET folks will own about 7.3% of the company. They put $2 million into the financing. So they've definitely earned their position there. With that, I believe I'm done with the presentation, and we can go back to cameras and whatever questions people have.
David, are you with us still?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, good. So one question that came in, and you might have already answered it, Peter, but just to be complete, what is the current and pending relationship between Reina Silver and Century Metals? Both seem to be raising funds for exploration, yet are involved in a reverse takeover. What's the end game for these two entities?
Okay, well, the end game, as I understand it, is that the two entities become one, called Reyna Silver. The Century Metals will own 7.2% of it, and they're basically buying. So the combined company will have the money that was raised directly by Reina Silver plus the money that was raised into Century Metals.
Okay. There are no other questions, and I just hate to turn it off abruptly because there are probably people out there. So we'll pause a few minutes here, or a minute, I guess. And if there's anything else that I've missed in the chat box, please send it again, but I don't see anything else at this time. So I'll just say, full disclosure, I am participating in the Reina Silver offering, and I did bring it to the attention of our mastermind members, which is part of the mastermind service, which is kind of early situations such as this. I vet them quite heavily. There's several, let's call them opportunities, that I pass on because, in my estimation, they do not merit further investigation. Whereas this one obviously does meet my criteria and then some. So there's that. Really, I don't have much else to say. I hope that my presentation was clear. I'll just reiterate slightly that most markets go up in 3 legs. If you're an Elliott waiver, which you don't have to be, they say 5, which means you have an initial leg up, you have a correction leg, then you have another leg up, you have another correction leg, and then you have the last and final leg. So the third leg to the upside is the most, usually in most cases, it is the most advantageous as far as price appreciation, but not necessarily the longest in duration. And all I'm doing is reiterating the 90% of the movement in the last 10% of the time. Again, I want to repeat that is not a guarantee. What it does suggest is what I just stated, and I'll say it one more time, that the third leg of any bull market, be it a stock market, a real estate market, a land rush, a Mississippi bubble, whatever, is the last leg, and that one usually really shoots in price appreciation, but usually doesn't last very long. From my perspective, sitting here today on the 15th of April, 2020, my best guess is that we probably have about a 3-year time frame from this time until what I consider to be the top. Now, that is putting my neck on the line to have it chopped off by a lot of trolls, and I know that. What I'm trying to do is give you a feel for the fact that we have some overhead resistance that we have to overcome. And if it's one thing I know, it's markets. But that doesn't mean I know the future. So we will have some overhead resistance. There will be people that hate silver because they bought it at 30 and they bought too much of it and they never want to hear the name again. And that silver will be sold back into the market. Although it's possible once this run really starts to move that it'll zip right through 30 like, a hot knife through butter. That remains to be determined. Regardless, we will work through the weak hands that are in silver or silver stocks that have been disappointed by the market. And remember, the function of a bull market is to shake off as many investors as it possibly can all the way up. So there will be some very, very questioning downside moves in both gold and silver as we continue up. It will climb that wall of worry. It will go, you know, the dollar's okay or the dollar's strong or geez, why did I ever get in the metals? And those will be pretty much momentary, meaning a week long, maybe a month long, maybe a few months long. But in a bull market, you want to buy the dips and add your position on the way up. Same as in the stock market from the 2008, 2009 bottom all the way until very recently. Now we are opposite. The gold market, the silver market, particularly the gold market, it's leading the way, will be buy the dips, and the stock market will be sell the rallies. There has been a shift. There has been a change. We are moving again to something similar to what happened in the 1970s, only this time it's global in scope, and we have the internet, and we have far less metal per capita and a lot more awareness. So in my studied view, we are probably going to see one of the best runs in the precious metals in my lifetime, and I don't have another one. And lastly, to plug Peter, who's been very, very good to me for many years, there is a feature of the Morgan Report in the special report section called Archie's Rule, which I learned from Peter. And the bottom line is this. Basically, in a hard asset modality, meaning mining particularly, that you really need 2x of the all-in sustaining costs. And the all-in sustaining cost for some of the best primary silver miners at this point in time, I'm going to say, and it's different with every mine and every company, but I'm going to say it's roughly where we are now in the silver market. So I'm going to stab at it at 16. If you use Archie's Rule, what that really means, if you study it, is that you need $32 an ounce silver to be a going concern. And this is defined by me, not Archie. But that's a good margin on your product. And that margin is sufficient to explore further, to pay everyone well, to pay all of the capital expenditure that is required to put a mine into production, to have enough money left over at the end to do the reclamation that is required in most of the world today, not all, where you bring the property back to basically nature where you started. So all those things, I don't think it's, when I first looked at it, I had to think about it a while, but the more I've thought about it over the years, the more it made more and more sense to me. Now that's based on silver being an industrial commodity only. No one ever thought of it as money. No one ever cares about it as money. That would probably be, in my view, a fair price or so, maybe higher in today's dollars. That's subjective. No one can really give you an amount that's correct for industrial purposes only. What I'm suggesting is it's far undervalued even at that level only. Now, if you look at it from a monetary perspective, where I've spent most of my time, what's the demand for money? And that's an easy one to answer. It's called infinite. There's an infinite demand for money, especially in a system that's based on debt that has to grow or we die, to quote Richard Russell, the late, great, and probably the best in my industry. I admire the man a great deal. I also adhere to some of his principles that the market knows more than everybody and that we pay attention to the market, not what I have to say. We want to know what my commentary about the market is, not what my personal wants or wishes are. So I basically said enough. Maybe we've generated some more questions. I do see one here, and it's one that I knew would come up, and thank you for answering it. Peter, I'm going to direct it to you. I'm not singling you out. I have asked this of almost every executive in the silver industry, and here it is. Do you have any concerns about mining in Mexico with the advent of lawlessness?
Of course. I have concerns about operating or exploring anywhere in the absence of rule of law, or actually for many years, and part of the reason I went to Mexico in the first place was because of an excess of laws in the US that made it virtually impossible to explore in our home country. That said, Mexico is not lawless from end to end. There are reasonable places to work. The Chihuahua City area is one of them. Santa Eulalia seems to be a very quiet, very comfortable place to work. Botopila is a little less so because it's out in the Sierra Madre, but it is on the paved highway infrastructure, which means there's much more vigilance out there than there are in other places. But obviously, anywhere you work in the world, I don't know where the questioner happens to live, but you can get yourself in trouble in a lot of different places in the world. Worked in Mexico for a long time, and touch wood, so far our projects have not been impacted by this. So yes, we're concerned. Yes, we take care. But right now we're doing the same thing in terms of COVID-19. We're doing our very best to take care, keep our people safe, because at the end of the day, I don't want a serious problem on my conscience that happens to somebody else who works for me.
Okay, so I am scrolling back and see, Peter, there have been several questions while I did my yakking. So let me go through those. Okay, let's see. Do you know what the ticker symbol at launch is expected to be?
It was in the presentation, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. I think RSLV, but I'm not 100%.
Okay. And I got up and left, as you might have seen, since I had the camera on. Do you have a timeline for going public? I think we went through that already.
Yes, we're basically all the paperwork is submitted, and I just checked, it is RSLV. The paperwork has been submitted, the 43101 has been submitted. It's basically in the hands of the exchange now, as I understand things. So depending on how fast they're working, given the realities of COVID-19, we expect late April, early May, probably safest to say sometime like mid-May to be up and running. But that doesn't mean we're waiting for that to happen. We have people on the ground mapping today.
Okay. I'm going to butcher the name because I didn't hear you pronounce it. Any geochemistry on the GUI project?
On the GIGI project? Yes. Historically, we have about 600 surface samples from work done for BHP and for Tech and for Mag Silver. We're taking additional samples in the course of the survey we're doing, the work we're doing right now. So we can see, I mean, these systems, to not get too technical, but the fluids in these systems move along fractures. So you go out and you find fractures that appear to be mineralized and you sample those, and we do get what appears to be a coherent geochemical halo that we can pick up in the sampling of those fractures.
Thank you. We answered that one. We answered that one. And this, I think, is for me. Thoughts on the liquidity warnings recently on the COMEX and LBMA. I will address that during my weekly perspective. So if you're signed up for the free newsletter, I will do it there. I'll probably go more in depth with my paid members, but maybe not. But I will address that later. Forecast for Reyna to start drilling. Did you say that already?
Yeah, we're doing the field work. We have to put some pieces together to be ready to drill. We have a pretty good idea where those holes are going to be, so we're already starting the permitting process. But then it's going to be a question of a combination of COVID-19, which is affecting the whole world, and how that affects the Mexican government and the permitting department. Until recently, until this happened, I'm aware of projects in the state of Chihuahua that were permitted in 6 weeks. So if we go back to something similar to that, we should comfortably be able to drill before the end of the year.
It's a tough one. What's the extent of Peter's involvement?
The extent of my involvement, I'm in this one to my toenails. I did my PhD work at this deposit. This target concept is the outflow of that. I put the property package together with my Mexican partners back in the late 80s and 90s. I'm a shareholder in the company. I am committing a certain amount of my time. I'm committing my best Mexican CRD geologist to do the work on the ground. I'm not sure I can be much more involved than that. But we're talking Paul, are we talking this breakfast? Are we talking the difference between the chicken and the pig, or what?
Okay, fair enough. Let's see. Wait a minute. I passed that one. The target area looks to be very steep. Can you comment on that?
The target area is not steep. It's
Okay.
not flat, but it's less than 50 meters worth of topographic relief in most places. Those big mountains that you can see in the background are well past the target area. Target area is the relatively low rolling hills in the central part of the picture.
Okay. I can answer this one, but I'll let you. Drilling at the end of the year will lead to results by when?
Obviously, that depends on what comes out of the drill hole. But typically it takes you anywhere from 3 weeks to a month to get assay results back. This will be a multi-hole program. We don't anticipate releasing information hole by hole. We will talk about a drilling program. We will drill that program. We will put out the results. So I would say fairly comfortably, we should be looking at having results out ahead of PDAC in 2021, assuming that we're allowed to have a PDAC in 2021.
Okay, fair enough. Peter, you are the man! Exclamation points, points, points. You aren't retiring soon, are you?
Retirement is for people who don't like what they do, or people who can't do it.
Well said. All right. We covered that one. There was a recent robbery at a mine. How do you plan to defend against that?
Well, that must be referring to the fairly elaborate and brazen heist at the Mulatos mine out in the Sierra Madre, where the robbers came in and in 10 minutes they hauled off the gold, put it in another airplane and disappeared. It must have been an inside job. So the best thing to do in a situation like that is vet your employees. But before you even go there, this isn't, Gigi especially, isn't going to be a property that is going to produce doré bars that someone can steal. We will be making concentrates, probably a lead con, a zinc con, and maybe a copper con if the copper grade comes up high enough. And those will all be shipped in very large lots to smelters in Mexico or elsewhere around the world. Much more difficult to steal a train car full of concentrates than a wagon with a dozen gold bars on it.
Okay, fair enough. Given the current economic conditions, how well capitalized is the company?
I think any company at the exploration stage that's got the $6.5 million roughly that Reyna has in the till with no debt and all of its taxes and like that for the next year paid, I think that's a very comfortable position to be in.
Agreed. You probably said this, forgive me, I did leave the room for a moment. How many meters are planned to be drilled this year?
We're hoping that our first drill program will be 10,000 meters. So that should be around $200,000. Excuse me, $2.5 million. That's basically what we're expecting. We're expecting for the first program to be looking for the intrusion. We're going to be drilling some fairly deep holes and then working our way from there back toward the historic part of the district. But 10,000 meters is what we're planning. Phase one.
I'll just editorialize.
Okay.
Sorry, I talked over. You might want to say it again. Sorry.
No, it'd be 10,000 was phase one, and assuming we'll directly into a second phase.
All right, I will editorialize this question. So it's somewhat personal. You can answer or not. What percentage of the company will Dr. Megaw have post-financing?
I would be happy to that if I could do the math, but I'm a geologist. So I'm not very good at that. It will be multiple million shares. So I will have skin in the game if that's basically the answer that they're looking for.
Okay. How can we invest in the company project at this time? I will answer that, and Peter, you can back me up or verify it. I think we're going to have to wait until it's a public market with the trading symbol outlined and wait for that to appear, and then you can get it through your normal brokerage account. Prior to that, as I said earlier, I am invested. It was through many people, not just yours truly, that were able to bring this opportunity to accredited investors. Some of those are on my mastermind service, so that was part of it, but certainly a rather minor part relative to the total funds that were involved in the project. Do you like to verify that, Peter?
As far as Mike, as far as I know, that's true. I mean, that's just part and parcel of the process of going through getting publicly listed. That once you've submitted your prospectus to the exchange, you're going through the RTO process. You can't change properties, you can't change directors and things like that. You just want to keep things as simple as possible until you get that process completed. So as far as I know, we just have to wait till we're public.
Is the target of Reina Silver on this property gold? Do you think you have MAG's gold? I'm not sure what that means.
The target on this property is primarily silver. These deposits are typically very rich in silver. Silver tends to be the dominant metal. Lead and zinc come along for the ride, or the silver comes along for the ride with the lead and the zinc. And we're hoping we have a gold sweetener. The geology indicates that there's a good probability that we'll have 1 to maybe 3 or 4 grams of gold on top of our silver grade. When a number of these mines operating in Mexico have a high enough gold content to cover the cost of operations by the recovery of the gold, which means silver is effectively free.
Peter, let me thank you personally. I'm sure everyone that's on the call or the presentation is also very appreciative of your time. That's going to wrap it up. We have all the questions. I want to remind everybody that the replay of this interview will be available on the YouTube channel for Reina Silver. And I will, of course, make note of that to my free email list. I'll be having a link that I will make available for everybody's ease of finding it. So thank you again. It's always fun. It's been a very up and down relationship, I would say, Dr. Megaw.
It's been fine. The silver's been up and down, but as you know, grade is king. I always look for things that have high enough silver grade so that you're not waiting up, you're not losing sleep at night, because you're going to make money under the worst market conditions. And if you're right and we're about to go into even better market conditions, then it's one of those times where instead of just sleeping at night, you can party at night. And I want to thank everybody for joining us and your attention to Reina Silver. Thank you.